you guys sang together before?
No, we've all sung together.
No, did we?
But I don't think Courtney and I, what have we sung together? Who knows? Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, she asked me a day or two ago if I would sing with her tonight, and I said we will try. And so we're going to try.
Okay, hang on, let me get it right. I've heard that's bad for you, but
Go for it.
life is easy when you're up on the mountain and you've got peace of mind like you've never known. But then things change and you're down in the valley. And don't lose faith, child, you are never alone. For the God on the mountain is still God in the valley. When things go wrong, He'll make them right. And the God of the good times is still God in the bad times. The God of the day is still God in the night. You talk of faith when you're up on that mountain. When talk comes easy, when life's at its best, but it's down in the valley of trials and temptations. That's when faith is really put to the test. For the God on the mountain is still God in the valley. When things go wrong, He'll make them right. And the God of the good times is still God in the bad times. The God of the day is still God in the night. The God of the day is still God in the night. Yes.
All right, tonight I want to try to talk a little bit, if I can. Is it possible to enjoy the storm? Now I will do. What do you call it when you? I know there's a word for it, but it just escaped me. I don't know. I know it is possible because God says all things are possible with Him. He says, for nothing is impossible with God. He says, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. I've had some storms that I didn't enjoy. I know it's possible. I will flat out tell you I have not mastered it. So these are just illustrations for us all to aspire to become, aspire to do. Go with me, if you will, to Mark. Mark. No. Yeah, go ahead and Mark. We'll do it in Mark. Mark chapter 4. And verse number 35. You guys can probably quote this passage, but there's two things I want you to see. And I hope it makes sense. And the same day, when evening was come, He said unto them, Let us pass over into the other side. And when he had sent away the multitude, they took him even as he was in the ship. And there were also with him other little ships. And there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship, so that it was now full. And he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. And they awake him and said unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And he arose, and he rebuked the wind, and he said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And they feared exceedingly, and said one to another, What manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Storms of life are going to come. There is no doubt in any of our minds. We've talked about plenty of the storms tonight. Many of you have experienced storms even this week. And the one thing about it is Jesus showed in that particular story that he is always with us. Even when the storm comes. You remember Elijah in the cave. What are you doing in here, Elijah? You remember the fiery furnace. I see 4. Didn't we throw 3 in? I see 4. One looks like something else. Whatever storm it is you're facing, Jesus is there with you. He asked them how they had no faith. They had Jesus right there with them. If the boat went down, Jesus was going down too. And so a lot of times we in our Christian life, he says, I'll never leave you, I'll never forsake you. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. All of these promises that we have, but yet and still we run into situations and circumstances to where we become very fearful. And I believe he asked us the same question. Have you got no faith? Because we know we're going to the other side. That's a promise. If I were to take a poll in here tonight, every one of us in here would be sure that we're going to the other side. We've got that settled in our heart. We're on our way to the other side, but it's a heck of a trip getting there. And sometimes along the journey, we feel like we're fearful. We are in wonderment. Sometimes, well, I think that's what fearful means, but that was what was going to be my next word too. Terrified, yeah, there's another one. And so go with me again now to chapter 6. I think, yep, chapter 6. Same book, chapter 6, Mark. Verse number 45. And straightway he constrained his disciples to get into the ship and go to the other side. Sounds real familiar to the previous passage, doesn't it? They're in a ship. They're going to the other side. Except there's one difference. This time he's not in the boat with them. Before unto Bethsaida, while he sent the people away. And when he had sent them away, he departed into a mountain apart to pray. And when evening was come, the ship was in the midst of the sea, and he was alone on land. And he saw them toiling in rowing. And from what I understand, I've never been there, but from what I understand, overlooking this Sea of Galilee, there's some pinnacle up on the way top, that Jesus was up on the top, and he could overlook the whole sea. He could see quite a bit of it, and he saw them struggling. Now, when Jesus left here, he said, I'm not going to leave you comfortless. I'm going to send you one to come alongside. Yeah. Jesus himself is apart in a mountain to pray. The Bible says, I think it's in Hebrews, that he's making intercession for us. He is praying for us. That hasn't changed. That hasn't stopped. So here we see that he saw them toiling and rowing, for the wind was contrary. My understanding of this is they had rowed and rowed and rowed for about 3 or 4 miles out in that boisterous sea, that sea that was contrary, and it was about the 4th watch of the night, between 3 in the morning and 6 in the morning. And so then he comes to them walking upon the sea, and would have passed them by. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed it had been a spirit, and cried out, For they all saw him and were troubled. And he immediately talked with them and said unto them, Be of good cheer, it's I, be not afraid. And he went into the ship, and the wind ceased, and they were sore. They were amazed in themselves beyond measure.
What?
Where am I at?
David 51, and wonder.
Yeah, I jumped down a verse. I'm sorry. Beyond measure, for they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their heart was hardened. I think it's in Matthew chapter 14. Now I want to look at, I think. I got kind of sidetracked. My eye was twitching again.
That's the
Matthew chapter 14, verse number 22. Same passage, different little spin on it. And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and go before him unto the other side, while he sent the multitude away. And when he had sent the multitude away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. The ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with the waves, and the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It's a spirit, and they cried out in fear. Now, when they were in there, remember the first passage that we looked at? Jesus was in the boat with them, and they were terrified because of the storm. And they screamed at him. They woke him up and screamed at him, Don't you care that we're perishing? In both of these last two passages, I don't see them scared of the storm. They got scared when they saw him walking on the sea because they thought it was a ghost. But it doesn't say that they were afraid of the storm. The previous one, where he stopped the wind, he got up and he rebuked the wind, and they saw the miracle, and they said, What manner of man is this? Is even the wind and the waves obey him? And so maybe, and I'm just asking, is it possible, that they learned their lesson and not to be afraid of the storm? Because it doesn't say in the next ones that they were afraid of the storm. I watched a movie one time. I don't do many movies, and so I don't remember the name of the movie at all. But it was something about storm chasers or whatever. There was a young couple, and they were chasing storms. And it was an ex-boy. It was almost like a Hallmark movie. You know, you fall in love with this guy, and you end up with this other one, and all this other stuff. But anyway, they got their jollies off by chasing storms. And I remember when I was growing up, there'd be lots of times when I would go out into the woods, and there was an old barn way back off in the woods that had been abandoned for many years, but it still had the metal roof on it. And I loved it in the summertime when those summer storms came up. And you just sit out there and you just watch those storms. And I don't remember seeing many of them out here. I've seen a few. But we used to get what we call electrical storms back there. There was no rain, but there was a lot of lightning, and there was a lot of thunder, and it was just, the sky would just be lit up, and it would be loud and crashing, and it was just wonderful. For me, it was just a wonderful thing. That terrified my mom to death. But I would go out and just sit in the yard and just watch it. I'd sit out there in the yard in my aluminum chair and just watch the storm. And even now, even now, if on the rare occasion that we get a storm here in Montana, I thought it was wonderful back in 11 when we got the flood to a certain point. And when it got up to the doorstep, I was ready for it to quit raining. But I love the rain. I love the storm. I love to watch. And I get out there, and I don't know, how many of you ever run around in the storm? Just gone dancing in the rain and playing in the rain? It reminds me of the story of the little girl who was walking along, and every time a lightning flash, she would stop and smile. And her mom finally asked her, What are you doing? She said, I'm smiling for God's camera. He's taking pictures of me. But I remember one time I took my mom fishing. And we were standing out there on the bank of the pond, and we were fishing and wasn't catching a whole lot of anything. And then all of a sudden, like it does back east, cloud rolls in, and all of a sudden just a thunder boomer just poured down on us. And we got soaking wet. The thunder was rolling and the lightning was flashing, but the fish started biting. And we were having a ball. She looked at me, she said, Should I go get in the truck? I said, What for? The fish are biting and you're already wet. And so we finished fishing in the rain and just having a blast. And all of that stuff brings my mind back to, is it possible to enjoy the storm? They were out on the boat. All of these guys had been on boats most of their life. All of these guys had been fishing most of their life. They knew what the storm could do. But it wasn't until they became disciples of Christ that they saw that God was even in charge of the storm. And after that story, it doesn't say that they were afraid of the storm. They were still afraid of the ghost, which is what they thought it was. They thought it was a spirit walking to them out there on the water. And in that culture, in that time period, seeing a ghost out, it was a sure announcement of pending doom. And so they were afraid of that. But it doesn't say that they were afraid of the storm. And I asked myself, is it possible to enjoy the storm? I was listening to the story of Bryson and all of the things that it was just like a puzzle that God had cut out. And this person was in the right place, and this person was in the right place, and this situation was in the right place. And had she not had all of the experience with all of the diabetics in our families, she wouldn't have recognized the signs of high blood sugar and just all of the things that... Do what?
It wasn't her.
Okay, whoever. It was. Y'all find that out when you get home. But it was all of the things from the emergency room saying, we're going to send him to the pediatric ward. He walks into the pediatric ward, and there's his doctor who knows all about him. And just every single thing. Is it possible to enjoy the storm? People are labeled diabetics every day. But I wonder how many of them got the pleasure of being diagnosed and treated and helped in the way that he was. Is it possible to enjoy the storm? Excuse me. We used to climb up and be like out here for the lodgepole pines. But we'd have a storm come up and we'd climb up in the top of one of those pine trees and we'd strap ourselves in, and when the storm was blowing and the wind was whipping those trees, and you just stand up there in the top of that tree and you just get blown all around. Y'all go spend your money on them King's Dominion and Six Flags over somewhere and all that kind of stuff. I just didn't climb up a pine tree and get whipped around. I ain't getting on no roller coaster. Them bolts come out and you crash to the ground. That tree ain't going nowhere. But is it possible? Pam's looking at me like I'm an absolute idiot. Have you never done anything fun, Pam? Jeez.
No, that's not fun.
Next time it comes up a storm, I'm going to come pick you up. We're going to go tree climbing.
Have you ever been on the Columbia River?
Have I ever been on the Columbia? No, you ain't going to get me on no whitewater rafting.
No, it's not whitewater rafting.
Oh, no, I've never
They
been.
actually go windsurfing.
Oh, okay.
I think those people are idiots.
Oh, okay.
That does not look fun with me. To put out a wetsuit and get on a board and go out in the wind and let the river beat you up.
No, I don't enjoy that either. No, that's the reason I don't go whitewater rafting and bouncing around on them rocks and stuff. They hurt. That's not fun. You get up in the top of a tree and just get blown around, it's okay. There you go. But is it possible to enjoy the storm? There's people like that movie I told you, they love to storm chase. They go get in the middle of a hurricane or tornadoes, I guess it is. They go and they get up there and they try to film the inside of a tornado. And they think it's a blast. So if we can enjoy the physical storms of life, and maybe I'm making it up, I don't know. But I just asked myself when I was rereading this, because it doesn't say they were afraid of the storm, they were afraid of the ghost. Had they learned that Jesus could take care of them in the storm? It says he was walking out across there and he was going to pass them by. He was going on to the other side because that's where he told them he was going. And the only reason they cried out is because they saw a ghost walk across the water. That was probably a little freaky too. I can ride a tree, but if I see a ghost, I'm probably going to run the other way. But are we spiritually capable of enjoying the storm that comes into our life? Because what did Peter say? Jesus could have waited until the waves stopped. Peter wasn't fearful of the storm. He saw Jesus walking out across the waves. They'd already been rowing for 3 or 4 hours, or 3 or 4 miles. They'd already been fighting the wind for several hours. And Jesus comes walking out across the stormy sea. I think that's very important. Jesus came walking out across the stormy sea. He could have settled the sea down. If I'd been Jesus, I'd have flattened it out before I went walking out across there. But he goes walking out across the sea, the stormy waves, and up, even just right here at Fort Peck. They say sometimes the waves up there get 15, 20 feet high just in the lake. Can you imagine what it was in a sea? Any of you ever watched that, Deadliest Catch or whatever in the Bering Sea up yonder? And the big boats are flipping. You ain't gonna get me on one of them. You know, I'll climb a tree, but I ain't getting on one of them boats. but it's. But Jesus walked out across the stormy sea, and Peter, maybe he thought back. Hey, Jesus has got the wind under control, and he says to Jesus, "If it's really you, if you ain't a ghost, because that's what I'm scared of. Apparently, I'm not scared of the storm anymore. So if it's really you, let me come out there with you. Is it possible to enjoy the storm?" If I had to guess, Peter was having a blast. When he got out of that boat and started doing something that he had never, ever, he'd been on the ocean all of his life. And I'm sure he might have tried to walk on the water before. Anybody in here ever tried to walk on the water? You've never tried to walk on the water?
At church camp.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Line up at the swimming pool and said,
Yeah.
"Let's do it."
I've tried it.
Nice skate rink. I walk across that all the time.
I've tried to walk on the water. I wasn't expecting to be able to do it, but I tried. I water skied quite a bit, you know, but that ain't the same as walking, because you get slow enough, you're going to sink. But he would, I don't know how far he walked. The Bible doesn't tell us. We come down hard on Peter because he sunk. You get out there and walk on the water. You get out there and walk on the stormy water. It's like she's talking about that Columbia River. Fat boy ain't getting on no river. You know, I don't even like the big one, and that's the slow one. I'll get out there if I get a big, huge boat. But I think he was having a blast. I think he was looking at you, hey, this is cool. And I think he was prancing out across that water, enjoying the storm. And it wasn't, and maybe it was a loud clap of thunder. Maybe it was a brilliant flash of lightning. But something in the storm distracted him from his focus. Something that was going on in the storm scared him. It wasn't the storm, because he was walking on the water. The stormy water, the boisterous water, the contrary wind. And he still said, Jesus, if it's you, can I come out there? Jesus said, yeah, come on. Jesus will allow you and me to enjoy the storm as long as we keep our focus on Him. Is it possible? I think so. Is it possible to get distracted? I think so. Is it possible to get scared? I think so. What time I'm afraid I'll trust in Him. He may not calm the storm, because He didn't calm the storm when Peter got out there on the water. He didn't even calm the storm when Peter began to sink. Peter cried out to Him and said, Lord, save me. And so I don't know how far he walked. You know, Jesus was apparently a pretty good distance away from the boat when they saw Him, because they thought He was a ghost. So I don't know how far Peter walked before he fell in the water. But it wasn't very far from Jesus. Because when he cried out, Jesus saved me, the Bible says He reached down His hand and pulled him up. And it doesn't say anything about Jesus ran to him or went to him or anything else. It just says he reached down and guided him. And so, how long Peter had a blast in the storm, I don't know. What I do know is something took his attention off Jesus. And that's when the storm got to him. So I think maybe it is possible to enjoy the storm. And Jesus picked him up and then walked in the storm, across the waves, back to the boat with him. And then the storm stopped. Jesus, I think, was letting him know that as long as I'm with you, you don't have to fear the storm. I personally I think Peter was a lot like us. I think this church, once you get this church to giggling over some of the stupidest stuff, turn around, Ty. I think once Peter got over his fear of sinking and standing back up on the water with Jesus, I think might have been let the good times roll. I can't prove any of this other than what I see. Other than what my weird imagination, my tree swinging imagination. But I just wonder, God, is it possible to enjoy the storm? And Peter answered and said unto him, Lord, if it bid me come out on the water. And he said, come. And when Peter was coming down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he got distracted, verse number 30, Lord save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth. And I don't think it was go-go gadget hand. Anybody remember that? Or that, what was it? There was one that was Gumby or something, you could stretch it, you know. I don't think that. I think Jesus was right there. I think Peter had made it all the way out to Jesus. But Peter also had to learn that he couldn't depend upon himself. He had to depend on Jesus. Because if he'd have walked all the way out to Jesus and turned around and walked all the way back to the boat, he'd have been still bragging about it.
Oh, yeah.
But Jesus let him get all the way out to it. And Peter, in his humanity, looked around and got scared. And every single one of us would have to, because we do. That's the reason Tiffany was back there crying a while ago, because at some point during this journey she's cried.
Yeah.
That's the last time you got scared about whatever situation you and I faced. Because Jesus is I believe Jesus is proving to us he can be trusted, even in the storms. And I think it is possible to enjoy the storm. It was a question at the beginning, is it possible to enjoy the storm? What do you think? Yeah. Is it? Is it still just as scary? Is there a possibility of you sinking? But is there a greater possibility of Jesus saving you when you begin to sink?
Oh, yes. True that.
Just a thought. I'll finish working on the sermon I was working on later. But it's just something that hit me in the middle of it. Is it really possible? And whenever I've gotten hit all of my life, I've always tried to hit somebody else. So when I got hit, I said, I'm going to hit you. You know, is it possible? Bryson, you've just been hit with some news that's going to affect the rest of your life. Enjoy it. Own it. Milk it. You know, it's just, there's so many things that could be so much worse. And from what I've heard about you in the last 3 days, Jesus has already showed you. I got you, bud. I got you. Whatever storm you and I are facing, he's there. He's just a hand reach away. That's as far, I mean, just right there. Because I found out in my life, he'll let me walk just as far as I want to. He'll let me go. I was thinking about, I know it hadn't rained in Enoch's day, but he walked with God for 300 years after he had a kid. And I'm sure there were electrical storms back then. Don't think there were any rainstorms, but I think the atmosphere had some things going on. The northern lights, if you ain't never seen them before, that'll freak you out. You know? And so I'm sure that kind of stuff was going on, but Enoch still walked with God. So yeah, I believe it is possible for us to enjoy the storm. Do I like the spiritual storms? Nope. Do I enjoy physical storms? Yeah. To a point. When Tiffany was a week old, Rose and I were coming down Capitol Boulevard in Raleigh, North Carolina. Brand new car. Little Datsun B210. One of them high dollar cars. Like a whole $4,000 back there.
It was a Nissan, honey, get it right.
Ain't that what I said?
No.
You said something with the B4 equals C10.
Datsun B210? Okay, it was a Nissan.
There we go.
Same company across the street from each other.
Oh my gosh.
But anyway, a flash flood came down the road behind us. And I could see it coming in the rearview mirror. And I took Tiffany, because we didn't put our kids in car seats, they were stupid. And I put her up on the ceiling. She'd have drowned. If I left her in the car seat, she'd have drowned.
Yeah.
And I had her up on the ceiling in my hand like that. And the water came down and it picked the car up and it just washed it down the highway and off into a creek. And the water was all inside the car, all across my lap, and I had the baby up on. And I don't like water. I don't like driving in the water. I used to drive across rivers for fun and things like that, just to see how far I could make it. No more. I don't like that kind of stuff. And so I enjoy the storms as long as I'm standing on my deck watching them. And I was coming, first time I ever came to Montana.